My name is Samantha Dawson. I'm 26 years old, and I run a small bakery in a quiet town called Applebridge, Colorado. People here know me as the girl who bakes cinnamon rolls that taste like childhood. But what they don't know is that everything started at an airport terminal 2 years ago, with a moment I will never forget. It was early summer, the kind of morning where the sun hadn't fully risen. But the airport was already alive with announcements and dragging suitcases. My father, mother, brother, and I were supposed to be leaving for a family trip to Europe. A memory trip, they called it. One last adventure with Grandma before her Alzheimer's got worse. Grandma Evelyn had been living with us for the past year. Ever since her memory began slipping, things had changed. She'd call me by my mom's name sometimes. She'd lose track of time, forget where she was, or hum lullabies from decades ago. But she always smiled when she saw me, always remembered my name. And more importantly, she remembered how she used to teach me how to bake. My parents weren't cruel, not in the traditional sense, but they were distant. They spoke of Grandma like she was a project, a task to manage, a burden to handle. And my brother Lucas, golden boy of the family, never had time for her. I noticed the way he flinched when Grandma asked him the same question twice, the way my mother sighed each time Grandma spilled something. And my father, he always looked at her like she was a ticking clock waiting to run out. At the airport, everything was moving too fast. We arrived in a rush, checked in bags, printed tickets. Dad looked tired, Mom impatient, Lucas distracted. Grandma clung to my arm, whispering, "Are we flying to Paris?" "Sammy, will there be croissants like the ones we used to make?" I smiled, nodded, and helped her sit in one of the cushioned chairs by the departure gate. "Just sit here," Grandma Dad said, straightening his blazer. "We'll go check in and come right back." That moment should have felt normal, but something twisted in my stomach. Why would he say that again? We had already checked in. I turned to ask, but they were already walking away, quickly, not toward the boarding gate, but toward the exit. I felt my heart skip. I took a few steps, pretending to head toward a vending machine, then turned sharply and followed them. That's when I saw it. Dad. Mom and Lucas were speaking in hushed voices by the airport exit. Mom looked nervous. Lucas rolled his eyes. "She won't remember in an hour anyway," he said. Dad muttered, "Let's just go. She's better off here than coming with us." And then they walked out, without even turning back. They were leaving her, leaving my grandmother, an 84-year-old woman with Alzheimer's, alone in a crowded airport. And they didn't intend to come back. I froze, air caught in my throat, a noise like static filling my ears. I ran back through the crowd, heart pounding. Grandma was still sitting exactly where we left her. She was holding her purse in her lap, looking around with a confused smile. "Sammy," she said when she saw me, "are we boarding now?" I took her hand. It was trembling. Mine was shaking, too. "No, Grandma," I whispered. "We're not going anywhere. Not with them." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I realized, if I didn't do something, no one else would. And so I made my decision. I would not let them leave her behind, and I would never let them forget what they did. I was never the one they expected much from. Growing up in the Dawson household meant knowing your place. My father, Leonard Dawson, ran a regional chain of hardware stores. He wore tailored suits, read finance magazines, and spoke in a tone that always sounded like a lecture. My mother, Cynthia, was once a school principal, sharp, polished, strict. And then there was Lucas, my older brother, 2 years ahead of me and always miles above, at least in their eyes. He was athletic, smart, charming. He played football, led debate team, went to business school, and joined my father's company right after graduation. And me, I was just Samantha, the one who liked to bake, who stayed home on weekends to try a new cookie recipe, who chose culinary school over a university degree. They never said it outright, but the message was clear: I didn't matter as much. "You're sweet, Sam. But not everyone's cut out to run a business," my dad once said. When I asked why he never offered me a role in the company, "Baking's fine, but it's not substantial," so I stopped trying to impress them. Instead, I found comfort in the warm, flour-dusted kitchen of my grandmother, Evelyn. She was the only one who never made me feel small. When I was 5, she pulled a chair to the counter, handed me a rolling pin, and said, "Here, Start with pie crust. Your hands are perfect for it. And we baked. Every summer. Every weekend, I could escape to her little greenhouse on the edge of town. She taught me how to fold dough, how to listen to bread rising, how to measure sugar by instinct. But beyond the recipes, she taught me things no one else did. Kindness isn't weakness, Sammy, she'd say. It's strength in disguise. When I turned 16, she gave me her old handwritten cookbook. The spine was worn pages smudged with butter stains. Inside the cover, she had written for Samantha, who makes life sweeter by simply being herself. That book meant more to me than any award I'd ever win. But while my bond with Grandma deepened the distance between me and the rest of my family grew, Lucas was the rising star. He interned at tech companies, dated the perfect girl, and made my parents beam at dinner parties. I stopped going to those. I had nothing to contribute. What could I say? I made a really great apple tart today. Even when Grandma began showing signs of forgetting things, misplacing her keys, repeating stories, my parents brushed it off. Old age, Mom said. Nothing serious. But it was serious. I noticed how Grandma struggled with time, how she once left the stove on and forgot why the cookies were burning, or how she got lost walking to the mailbox. I begged my parents to get her checked. She just needs structure, Dad insisted. She'll be fine at home with us. So they moved her into our guest room. But it wasn't care, it was containment. They kept her fed, gave her medication, and called that enough. But there was no warmth, no time, no patience. It broke my heart to watch. Lucas barely acknowledged her. If she forgot his name, he'd smirk and walk away. My mother spoke to her like a child. My father avoided her entirely. The only times she lit up were when I came home from work and brought a box of pastries from the bakery. "These remind me of your grandfather," she'd say. "He loved your lemon scones." Even when she forgot what day it was, she never forgot how those scones tasted. One afternoon, I found her in the living room, staring out the window with her purse clutched in her lap. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked gently. She smiled. "Paris," she whispered. "Your grandfather always said he'd take me. I think we're going now." I nodded, not correcting her. "We'll go soon, Grandma. I promise." That's how the trip idea started. My mother suggested we give her one last memory. My father agreed, calling it a necessary closure. Lucas, ever the planner, booked flights and hotels. But something about the way they planned it felt rehearsed, too clinical. There were whispered conversations behind closed doors, phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, talk of final arrangements. I told myself I was imagining things, that no one would do something as heartless as what I feared. I was wrong. Because when we got to the airport, I realized the truth. This trip wasn't for Grandma. It was a plan to leave her behind, and I was the only one who saw it coming. The drive to the airport was unusually quiet. Lucas sat in the front seat next to Dad, talking about the business merger he was handling. Mom sat beside me in the back, scrolling through her tablet, pretending to double-check our itinerary. Grandma Evelyn sat between us, gazing out the window with her purse in her lap, the same one she'd been clutching for years. Inside it, she kept tissues, hard candies, and a worn photograph of her and Grandpa standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. We never talked about how Grandpa never actually took her to Paris. It was a promise made long ago that life never delivered on. And yet, in Grandma's mind, that promise still lived. She still believed. And maybe that's why she was so excited for this trip. "Will we see the bakery near the river?" she asked, smiling up at me. "Yes, Grandma," I whispered. "We'll see it all." But deep down, something didn't feel right. The bags were oddly light. I noticed Dad had only packed one small suitcase. And during lunch that week, I overheard Mom on the phone with someone from Ridge Valley Retirement Living. When I asked about it, she said it was for a friend. At the airport, the tension was thicker. "Just keep her calm," Dad said to me under his breath as we waited in line. "If she asks too many questions, just tell her it's a long flight." Lucas leaned down and whispered to me, "She won't even notice we're gone until the plane's in the air." I stared at him, but he didn't flinch. His face was blank, as if this were routine, as if abandoning someone was just logistics. Then came the moment, After checking in, we reached the waiting lounge. It was packed with travelers dragging suitcases, sipping coffee, staring at screens. My parents led Grandma to a chair by the window and sat her down gently. "Just sit here, Mom," Dad said. "We'll go check on the gate. Be right back." That was when I felt the lie. I watched them walk away, watched their pace quicken. They weren't heading toward the gate. They were walking toward the escalators, toward the airport exit. I stood, blood roaring in my ears. "Where are you going?" I called. Dad turned startled but annoyed. "Don't cause a scene, Samantha," he hissed. "We're doing what's best for everyone. For everyone," I repeated. "She's not a suitcase you can leave behind. She'll be fine," Mom said sharply. "There are people here. She'll be picked up in no time." "Picked up?" I asked. "By who? Someone from the center." Dad replied, his tone stiff. "We arranged everything." "We're not monsters." Lucas rolled his eyes. "Can we just go? She's not going to remember any of this in 2 hours." I looked at them, my family, the people who raised me and saw strangers, cowards hiding behind logic and excuses, people who couldn't see past inconvenience. "She remembers me," I said, "and I remember her, and I will not let you do this." Dad stepped closer. "You are overreacting." "No," I said quietly. "You're underfeeling." He blinked, and for a moment there was a flicker of doubt, but it vanished. "We've made our choice, Samantha. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Then they turned and walked away, just like that, like it meant nothing. I stood frozen, unable to move until I felt a hand on my arm. Grandma. She was looking at me with soft eyes and a smile that trembled. "Are we getting on the plane soon, sweetheart?" she asked. "I don't want to miss the sunrise over Paris." I knelt beside her, taking both her hands in mine. "No, Grandma," I said. "We're not getting on that plane." Her smile faded. Did I do something wrong? Tears welled up in my eyes. "No," I whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong, but they did, and I'm not going to let you pay for it." I took her bag, helped her up, and slowly guided her away from the window. My heart was pounding. I had no plan, no idea what I'd do next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't leaving her. And I wasn't going to let this moment define who we were. We walked slowly toward the exit opposite the direction my family had taken. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, all I'd see was the truth I never wanted to face, that the people I called family had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't even know where I was walking, just that it had to be away. Away from the betrayal. Away from the place where my own parents had tried to disappear, someone they claimed to love. I led Grandma through the terminal, one hand gripping her suitcase, the other holding her hand tightly. She was slow, unsteady, asking questions every few steps. "Are we still going to see the Eiffel Tower, Sammy?" "Where's your mother, dear?" "Is George?" She paused. "No, never mind." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. My voice would crack, and if it cracked, I'd break. I found a small corner near the airport cafe tucked beside a luggage cart station. It was quiet enough. I sat Grandma down and crouched in front of her, searching her face. She looked tired, confused, but calm. She trusted me. Even if she couldn't remember everything, she trusted me. That was all I needed. I took a shaky breath. "Grandma," I said gently, "I need to ask you something. Do you have any emergency contacts or someone we can call?" She stared for a moment, then reached into her purse, the same old black leather one she carried everywhere. She fumbled for a moment and pulled out a folded tissue, 2 butterscotch candies, and an envelope. It was cream-colored, a little worn around the edges, but unopened. Her fingers hesitated as she handed it to me. "Your grandfather told me to keep this for you," she whispered, "in case I ever forgot what mattered." I took it, heart racing. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, "To Samantha, for when the world turns its back." I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter and a set of legal papers. I read the letter first. "My dearest Sammy, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go as I hoped. I'm sorry. I wanted to stay strong for you, to remember you every day, every detail of the life we shared. But memory is a fragile thing, and I could feel mine slipping long before anyone else noticed. I saw how they looked at me like I was fading, but you never did. You looked at me like I still mattered. You brought me pastries even when I forgot your name. You held my hand when the world grew confusing. I know what they think of you, Sammy. I've heard them whisper, "She's just a baker, just a girl." But I know better. You are strength. Quiet, steady, beautiful strength. That's why I've left everything to you. The house, the land, the insurance money, the trust account your grandfather started before he passed. You'll find the documents here. It's all been notarized and witnessed. The lawyer is kind. His name is Andrew Green. He knows to expect your call. They won't understand. But that's not your burden to carry. You carry love. You carry legacy. And that's more than they ever will. I love you always. Grandma Evelyn. I was still holding the letter when my hands began to shake. The documents were real, legal, stamped and signed. A living trust naming me the sole heir to her estate. A modest house on the edge of Applebridge, a savings account, a small insurance policy. Enough to live simply. Enough to build something of my own. I looked at Grandma. She was humming softly now, lost in her own world, smiling at a memory I couldn't see. But I could see what mattered. She remembered me with her heart, even if her mind struggled. She remembered love, and she had prepared for this, for the day when they would try to erase her, and for the day I might be the only one left to fight for her. That was the moment the fear left me. I stood up, folded the documents, and placed them safely back in her purse. Then I pulled out my phone. I called a cab. No more waiting, no more airport. We were going home. The cab dropped us off at a small roadside motel an hour later. I paid in cash. The room wasn't fancy, just 2 twin beds, a flickering lamp, and a television from the 90s, but it was warm, safe. That night, I helped Grandma change into a clean shirt, brushed her hair, and tucked her into bed. She held my hand as I turned off the light. "Sammy," she murmured, "did we make it to Paris?" "We did." I whispered, tears in my throat. It was beautiful. The next morning, I made the first call to Mr. Green. He picked up on the second ring. "Andrew Green speaking." "Mr. Green, this is Samantha Dawson, Evelyn's granddaughter." There was a pause. Then his tone changed. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said softly. "Your grandmother was very clear about what she wanted. I've got everything ready when you are." We met 2 days later at a small law office in Applebridge. The paperwork went through smoothly. No disputes, no questions. The house was officially mine. The trust transferred. And just like that, everything shifted. I wasn't just a girl with a box of recipes and a tiny kitchen job. I was the keeper of my grandmother's legacy. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I stood at the front gate of Grandma's house, key in hand, heart pounding. It wasn't a grand house, not the kind you'd see in real estate ads or glossy magazines. But it was ours. A 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of Applebridge, with faded blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and an overgrown garden that used to bloom with wild rosemary and lavender. The last time I had been here, I was 16, helping Grandma bake lemon shortbread in her tiny sunlit kitchen. Now I was back, not as a guest, not as a child, but as the one responsible for everything she left behind. I pushed the door open slowly. The air inside smelled faintly of vanilla and old books. Dust lined the windowsills, and the furniture was covered in sheets, but the bones of the house were strong. Her spirit lingered in every corner. For the first time in years, I felt grounded. I helped Grandma settle into the back bedroom, the one that used to be Grandpa's study. I placed her rocking chair near the window so she could look out at the garden. I set her photo of Grandpa on the nightstand. Each day I made her tea, brushed her hair, and read aloud from the stories she once told me. Caring for her wasn't easy. There were days she didn't recognize me. Nights she woke up frightened. Mornings when she tried to leave thinking she still lived in another time. But I held her hand through every episode, reminded her gently, and met her confusion with patience. During those moments, I remembered her words. "Kindness isn't weakness, Sammy. It's strength in disguise." In between caregiving, I began restoring the house. I painted the shutters, cleared the garden, cleaned the kitchen, and polished the old wooden table where we used to roll dough. And then one afternoon, I took out her recipe book, the one she gave me when I was 16. Still worn, still stained, still mine. I flipped to the first page. Her handwriting looped across the top: Evelyn's lemon shortbread. Best enjoyed with someone you love. And just like that, I knew what I needed to do. That fall, I opened a bakery. I called it Evelyn's Oven. The town was skeptical at first. A young woman opening a bakery with no investors, no fancy marketing, and barely any help. But word spread quickly. They came for the lemon shortbread, then the pumpkin scones, then the cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings that reminded people of their childhood kitchens. Locals came, and then visitors. A reporter from the regional paper wrote a story about the granddaughter who turned betrayal into a bakery. They took a photo of me and Grandma standing in front of the shop, her hand in mine, both of us smiling. They didn't know the full story. I didn't tell them about the airport, about the abandonment, about what I'd left behind. That part stayed between us. Each day after closing time, I sat with Grandma on the porch. She rocked slowly in her chair, sometimes humming, sometimes quiet. There were days when she looked at me and said, "Have we met before?" And others when she held my hand and whispered, "You remind me of someone I used to love." But then there were moments, rare, precious moments, when she looked straight at me and said, "Sammy." And I knew she was still in there beneath the fog, beneath the forgetting. One evening, as we shared warm biscuits and watched the sun dip behind the trees, she turned to me and said, "I'm glad you're the one who came back." I didn't ask what she meant. I just smiled and said, "Me too." It was about 6 months after the bakery opened that I got the first call from my mother. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. One from her, one from Dad, 3 from Lucas. "Mom, where are you, Samantha? We're worried." Dad, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We need to talk." Lucas, "You're being dramatic. Come home." Lucas again, "She's our grandmother too." I stared at the messages, my chest tight. They'd abandoned her, left her in an airport terminal like luggage they no longer wanted to carry. And now that there was money, now that the will had been read, they remembered who she was. No, they didn't want her. They wanted what they lost. I didn't respond. But a week later, they showed up at the bakery. It was early morning. I was kneading dough behind the counter when I saw them through the front window, Mom in her heels, Dad in a blazer, Lucas in his pressed shirt, all dressed like they were headed to a meeting. They stepped inside like they owned the place. Mom's eyes welled up. "Sammy," she said, reaching out, "please, we just want to talk." I held up a flour-dusted hand. "Talk. Now you want to talk." Lucas stepped forward. "Look, we made a mistake, okay? But she's our grandmother. She had no right to cut us out completely." "She had every right," I said. "You made her feel like a burden, like she didn't matter. And you left her." I saw it. I'll never forget it. Dad's jaw clenched. "We thought it was best. She needed care. She needed love." I interrupted. "Not a facility, not to be forgotten." There was a long pause. Then Mom said softly, "Is she okay?" I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, "She's at peace." And I meant it, because even in the days when her mind wandered, her heart was safe, safe with me. They didn't ask to see her, they just turned and left. Winter came softly to Applebridge. Snow gathered on the bakery's windowsills, and the mornings were quieter now. The rush of customers slowed after the holidays, replaced by locals who came not for pastries but for comfort. Some brought flowers, others brought memories of Grandma Evelyn's, stories from church, the library, the school where she used to teach reading to first graders. She had touched more lives than I ever realized. At home, Grandma's health was declining. She slept longer, spoke less. Some days she didn't get out of bed at all. Her hands, once steady as she measured flour and folded dough, now trembled even when holding a teacup. I adjusted my schedule. I closed the bakery 2 days a week, hired a part-time assistant named Holly, a kind high school senior who reminded me of myself years ago. Quiet, observant, patient. Every evening, I sat with Grandma at her bedside, reading to her from her favorite books. Sometimes she responded with a nod or a faint smile, other times only silence. Then one morning she was different, alert, calm. Her eyes were clearer than I'd seen in weeks. I walked into the room expecting the usual stillness, but she turned her head and smiled. "Sammy," she said, her voice soft but certain. I froze. "Hi, Grandma." She patted the bed beside her. "Sit with me." I did. She reached for my hand and held it gently. Her fingers were cold, her grip weak, but her gaze was steady. I may not remember everything she said slowly, but I remember you. Tears filled my eyes. "I'm right here," she nodded. "I always knew you'd be the one. They didn't see you, but I did. You were never just a girl. You were the one who stayed." I couldn't speak. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slow and shallow. "When I go," she whispered, "don't carry sadness. Carry the joy. The smell of warm bread, the laughter in the kitchen, the songs your grandfather used to hum. I will, I promised. Every day. And promise me something else," she said. "Anything. Keep baking, keep loving, and never let them tell you who you are. I promise." She smiled, then looked past me as if seeing something I couldn't. "George," she whispered, "you're here." That was the last thing she ever said. She passed away the next morning peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was small, just as she would have wanted. No long eulogies, no flashy displays, just a gathering of the few who mattered: neighbors, old students, and me. I buried her under the oak tree behind the house, the same tree where she used to read to me in the summers. I placed a photo of her and Grandpa together inside the casket, along with the first lemon shortbread cookie I ever baked from her recipe book. Abby, my cousin, sent a letter from out of state. She hadn't known the full story, but she'd always admired Grandma. "You were her favorite," she wrote. "Everyone knew it." I didn't invite my parents or Lucas, not out of spite, but because they no longer belonged to the story of her final days. This story was ours, mine, and Grandma's. And I wanted the last chapter to be about love, not regret. That evening I returned to the bakery, closed the doors early, lit a candle, sat at the kitchen table and pulled out her cookbook. The first page still read Evelyn's lemon shortbread, best enjoyed with someone you love. I read it aloud, then I baked a fresh batch, just for her. 2 years have passed since Grandma Evelyn left this world. The seasons have come and gone through the little town of Applebridge, each one leaving its mark on the bakery windows and my heart. The flowers she once planted in the garden have returned faithfully each spring. Lavender, rosemary, wild daisies, even though I never quite learned how to tend them properly. Somehow they remember. So do I. Evelyn's Oven has become more than a bakery. It's a place where stories linger. People don't just come here for pastries anymore. They come to feel something familiar, something kind. Every table has a photo tucked under glass, a moment from Grandma's life captured in black and white or fading color. Her wedding day, her first class of students, her laughing in the kitchen with flour on her nose. And right by the register next to the tip jar sits the photograph of her and me, our last one together outside the bakery, her hand in mine. It's become something of a town emblem. Strangers point at it and ask, "Is that you with your mom?" And I always smile. "She was my grandmother," I say. But really, she was everything. I still get the occasional message from my parents, mostly emails now, short, hesitant, vague attempts to reconnect. They ask about the bakery, ask if I'm happy, ask if Grandma left any letters for them. I haven't responded. Not because I hate them, but because I forgave them quietly a long time ago, and that was enough. I don't need their understanding to know I made the right choice. Some truths don't need revisiting. Some goodbyes once said don't need to be repeated. Lucas never wrote again. I think in his own way he knows he lost something he'll never get back. But Abby visited last summer. She brought homemade jam and hugged me for a long time on the porch. "I always knew you were the brave one," she said, brushing tears from her cheeks. "I just didn't know how much it would cost you." "It didn't cost me," I told her. "It saved me." Because that's the truth. choosing grandma staying behind, taking the hard path, walking away from the family I once thought I needed, it didn't ruin my life. It gave me one. Some evenings when the shop is quiet and the ovens are cooling, I step outside and sit on the bench near the garden. I close my eyes and breathe in the scent of sugar and thyme and the earth waking up beneath the stars. Sometimes I hear her voice in the wind. Never let them tell you who you are. And I smile, because I didn't. I became who I was always meant to be. Not through rebellion, but through love, through loyalty, through the simple, unwavering act of staying when no one else would. If you've made it this far into my story, I want to leave you with this. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. It's who remembers your name when the world forgets you. It's who holds your hand when you're lost and whispers, "We'll find our way back." Grandma Evelyn didn't leave me money to change my life. She left me love to shape it. She didn't teach me how to make a living. She taught me how to make a life. And every morning when I unlock the doors to Evelyn's oven, I carry her with me in every loaf, every recipe, every warm bite that reminds someone of home. So no, I don't regret staying behind at the airport. I don't regret walking away from that gate. Because in that moment, I wasn't giving something up. I was choosing something sacred, something real. I was choosing her. And she had already chosen me. Forever.